All right. Hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of the Health Detective Podcast by Functional Diagnostic Nutrition. My name is Evan Transu, aka Detective Ev, and I will be your host for today's show, episode number 322 of the Health Detective Podcast. And you guys might have just seen us on earlier, so they got me doing a full day here at FTEd. We're doing a few podcasts, and then we have this whole holistic health week that we're working on, but I can't tell you guys about that yet. We're going to be releasing some more information on that soon. I just lost my guest. Let's see if I can bring him back in. Okay, so Sage, I'm going to assume if that happens, I just bring you back in and we hope for the best, right?
We'll keep rolling. Yeah.
Okay, hey, this is working so far. So for those on audio, they're probably like, what the heck's going on? But video, this will make sense. So today, our guest is actually friends with Sebastian. You guys might have remembered him being on Sebastian Yepes, and that was an amazing episode. Sebastian's such a cool guy. And Tracy and I were actually kind of laughing in a very positive way when you were figuring out the internet side, Sage, because there's a smile and energy that you walked in with that is so reminiscent of Sebastian's that it's like birds of a feather flock together. So I just thought that
He's
was
a
really
legendary
cool.
guy, so I appreciate that a lot.
Yes. I'll get into it. So Sage Dammers, the co-founder, CEO, product formulator, and master chocolatier of Addictive Wellness, has dedicated his life to let me get it here, to the pursuit of holistic wellness and nutrition. Beginning his journey as a curious teenager, Sage ventured beyond conventional education to immerse himself in the ancient herbal systems and nutritional practices of indigenous cultures, especially Taoist tonic herbalism. With a flair for innovation, he delights in using the most powerful superfoods and adaptogens to craft healthy renditions of beloved indulgences, ensuring that wellness and pleasure go hand in hand. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Cool. So I know that we had talked off air, and it's totally fine. We have a variety of health stories that have popped in here in 300 something episodes. So it doesn't need to be the most extreme thing, but you did have some health symptoms at one point in your life. So I'm just curious, what were those and when did they begin?
Well, growing up, I was raised on a vegetarian diet by my parents, but not necessarily a healthy vegetarian diet by any means. It was kind of like white rice and tofu 5 nights a week, and then a night of pizza and a night of pasta. So you could certainly say there was some nutritional density lacking in my diet growing up. And of course, a lot of carbs happening as well. And I didn't understand what it meant quality in terms of food. We were raised mostly on organic foods, fortunately. So that was a huge step forward, and not a lot of fast food or things like that. But certainly it was imperfect, as almost any diet is that isn't very consciously pursued. So I always had this, starting like in my early teens, this cystic acne that was just rough. A lot of people go through acne at various levels, but anybody who's gone through it knows it hits you psychologically as well. You just like, it's your face, it's how you present yourself to the world. And when it's not really happening for you and it's painful and it's uncomfortable, it's not great. And I got on antibiotics when I was 15, and it took me about 4 years of daily antibiotics before I kind of had learned enough to realize this isn't right. This is not a solution. I don't want to stay on these. I need to figure out a different way. And it was during those years that I was learning more and more about alternative approaches to health, the Eastern concept of really seeking to build this foundation of health rather than waiting until you get sick and looking for a cure. And I had learned enough to realize there's got to be a different way to go about this. And it took time. And, I had to deal with candida after this. Antibiotics really lay the groundwork for a candida to roll in and have a real big party in your system. But in the end, I managed to come through it, deal with my candida, deal with my acne. And in some ways, I wish I never happened. But in many other ways, I'm grateful for it, because sometimes it's those health challenges that force you to educate yourself and become so aware of what you're putting in your body, what you're doing every day, how everything works in your system. So it's in the long term, I think a real blessing if you consider having to go through a few years of some crappy stuff, and then you're blessed with knowledge from that you carry through for the rest of your life.
Yeah, I appreciate that you brought up the psychological aspect of it, man, because I told you mine was cystic as well. And it's to the point that I wasn't even attempting dating. And it's not like being hard on myself. It's like, no, this is stand out. This is something that is very odd if you're walking down the street and people look at you. So it does get you. And then you got to recover from all that stuff. Even when you nail down the acne finally, it's like now you got to get your confidence back and all these things that you might have had before, maybe not. And so what I'm curious about too is it sounds like even just in your bio and then what you have already said so far, you really had an interest in these things much earlier than most people would have an interest at all. And again, some people will never be interested in these topics, but it sounds like that was already happening in the teenage years. Was this largely influenced by your family seemingly being health conscious, or where did this come from, this curiosity?
Yeah, so my family was always very health conscious and health interested. Didn't have all the answers to my questions, but they had the intention in the right place. And so when I was a teenager, like 14, 15, they opened up a wellness center in Westlake Village, California. And they had way before it was cool, we're going back to 2004. They had infrared saunas, infrared heated jade massage beds. They had like a selection of various different superfood products. And so I was able to kind of grow up in some pretty formative years around that. And for one, it opened me up to this idea of working on your health ahead of time. It's kind of cliche these days, but an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of a cure
Mhm.
type of thing. And that's not something a 14 or 15-year-old is usually thinking about. So it was a huge blessing to be exposed to that kind of thought. And also, I was seeing people come in there whose whose health was suboptimal, right? They may have back problems, they may have kidney problems, maybe they have prostate problems. And I was seeing them through pursuing these alternative methods get better and really turn their lives around. But I was thinking, most of these people were in their 40s, 50s, 60s. And I thought, well, they're getting unhealthy and then putting all this work into just building themselves back to like a baseline okay level. What happens if you don't wait until you're sick? What happens if I get onto all of this stuff now at the ripe age of 15 and try to stop my aging right here, and prevent these things? What does this mean for the quality of life that I can have? Yes, maybe it extends the life as well. Maybe we start looking well beyond 100. Who knows? It's kind of a dream, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but I would love to go well into the triple digits. But more so, the quality of life. So when I would first tell people at that time, like, oh, I want to, work on my longevity. Nobody in high school wants to talk about longevity. Like, what the heck are you talking about, man? And they were thinking, I don't want to be 105 and walking around like all unhealthy, like old and wrinkled and pushed around in a wheelchair. But to me, it wasn't about that. I don't want to be old just for the sake of being old. I want to be the youngest old person that I could possibly be. I love life and I want to be extending what's these days more commonly talked about as my health span, and be very active into my older years. Surfing has always been a huge passion of mine and one of the big driving forces in me wanting to be as healthy as possible. And I want to think like, okay, most people peak in their surfing abilities around their mid 30s now. Okay, I'm in my mid 30s now. I'm still improving. What if I can keep pushing this further and continue improving until I'm 50? I'm never going to be a world class competitor of any sorts, but it's just about being able to get out there and maximize the good time that I'm having.
Yeah, I love this mindset. And regardless of the family influence or not, I still think it takes a very interesting person to be able to have that foresight and see the future before it happens. I've done that with certain things, mostly like career wise. I'm like, all right, I don't want to be here for the next 60 years hating what I'm doing. So I'm good with that. But I'm the one that can see these types of things. And in fact, I would only say you're probably about the fifth person that I've met. A lot of the other ones are close friends that really were able to dedicate themselves to this health stuff, if you'll call it that, before something major happened. Almost everyone else, including myself, needed something kind of big to happen before they could really get better. We're rolling with this, Sage, aren't we? Like this is we're doing it. So for those on audio, you have no idea what's happening here tech-wise, but we're trying to make it work. Um, so it really takes a special type of person to be able to see ahead into the future. And our friends, or my friend Ben and Lauren, do you know them? Because I know you know Sebastian. Do you know Ben and Lauren Torres? All right, guys, we got seven of you looking at. You're being very gracious. I don't know if we're gonna make it here. I might have to start talking to you guys about chocolate. I do eat a lot of chocolate, so that I can definitely say. You
Okay,
good,
I'm
Sage?
back. Yes, I'm good.
Okay. We have 7 very kind people that still hung on with us here. If
Ah,
this,
thank you,
we
7 people.
might have to, you might have to cut it a little bit short, unfortunately, if this does happen, or just do it and to be a lot.
Sure, sure, sure.
So do you know Ben and Lauren Torres? Because I know you know Sebastian. I don't know if you knew those guys.
I know of them. I don't. They're
Okay.
not. I don't know them so well, but yeah.
That's fine. So they were two of the people that, nothing major health wise, like no big things going on, but they said, all
Yep.
right, I see all my friends doing this. Why don't I start doing this too? So that I can be, healthy well into the 40s, 50s, 60s. I also love what you said about it's not about getting old for the sake of getting old. I think this is something that so many people misinterpret. I'll never actually forget one of my other friends, Shivani. We were working at my parents' restaurant at the time. This was like 10 years ago. And we were discussing like how I wanted to live to like 95. I just made up a number, right? I'm like, I want to be at least 95. And she's like, oh, I don't want to be 90. But it wasn't that she didn't want to be 90. It was she didn't want what she thought 90 meant, right? Was like, oh, debilitated and you can't do stuff. And perhaps 90 is getting, a little far out there. Certainly, I've never heard of a 90-year-old that's acting like a 20-year-old. But in between those two extremes, man, as I'm getting older, there's a lot of 60 and 70-year-olds that are really damn impressive. I've adopted the very alpha activity of playing pickleball in my late 20s. And so I play with these people, though, that have been doing these sports like tennis or racquetball for their whole life. And I play with a 73-year-old. I mean, he jumps and spikes the ball. He runs
Yeah.
around on the court. I'm like, this guy is 73 years old. America is saying his life expectancy is 5 years from now. I'm like, that dude ain't going anywhere 5 years from now. What are you talking about? He's moving better than a lot of the 50-year-olds that I know. So I love this mindset with stuff. How did this turn into, and maybe this is too big of a jump, so if it is, feel free to kind of break this down a little more, but how did this develop into starting your own company and like really dedicating your life to this even career-wise?
Well, yeah. To bridge the gap a little bit,
Sure.
I was getting into making these superfood smoothies for myself. And I had like this mix of hemp protein and spirulina and chlorella and some other Western herbs like milk thistle going in there, and would do some frozen berries and orange juice. I didn't know what I was doing. I just wanted to be as healthy as possible. And I didn't really think about flavor. I had dismissed how things would taste entirely. I just was focused on how it would make me feel, because I was feeling amazing from this. And I was noticing huge changes in my mental clarity and awareness and my energy levels. And eventually, at some point, whenever you're doing something that's really benefiting you, the natural next step is to want to share it with the other people that you care about. The problem is, the other people around me were my college friends at this point, and the interest is generally not there. But when I was on a surf trip with my friends in Costa Rica, and I would bring at this time my little magic bullet blender and my superfood powders, and would be blending these up with some fruit in the corner of the hostel where we were staying, and we would go out and surf. And after 2 hours, they'd be tired and hungry and want to come in and eat and rest. I'd be out there for 4 or 5, 6 hours, and they, after a few days, were like, hey, can you, like, they noticed I was doing something different. Can you maybe make me one of those? Can I try that? Because health wasn't necessarily a priority to them, but serving performance was. And there was certainly an open gateway there. And so I said, like, this is the moment I had been waiting for. I was so excited, had to try to calm myself down, like, yeah, sure, we can do that. And so I did. The problem was, it tasted so bad that they could hardly get it down. And this was like in the peak of the opioid epidemic. And my friends, were great people, but they had been hit by this very hard as well. And they had a lot of toxicity going on. And sometimes when you have so much toxicity going on and you take something that has some powerful detoxifying effects, those toxins want to go right back out the same way they came in. And that's just a part of the way nature works. And so 2 out of the 4 of them were vomiting within a couple of minutes.
Wow.
And I thought, okay, I gotta reassess. I gotta reassess my plan here to share my love for health and wellness with others, because this is not going to be a sustainable way to do it, making people throw up and try to choke things down that taste horrible. So I realized I need to go to the complete opposite extreme. I need to figure out how to make the healthiest ingredients in the world taste so good that people will want to eat them and drink whatever I make, because it tastes amazing. And it just so happens to be massively healthy and beneficial as an afterthought. And so that was
Mhm.
my intention. I didn't know how I was going to achieve this, but in the next year or so, I came across the concept of cacao as being a superfood. And it was strange to me at first because cocoa powder, my only familiarity with that was like a Hershey's hot chocolate mix that sometimes we would drink with breakfast as when we were kids. That was probably like 80% sugar, 20% uh, like other crap, and I don't know, maybe 0.5% of actual cocoa from the lowest quality source imaginable. And so it was like, wait, this is amongst the other superfoods that they're selling at the wellness center. What is this? And I started learning more about it. And because it was, this is the highest natural source of magnesium, the highest natural food source of antioxidants, high in chromium. You got zinc, iron, all kinds of other interesting neurotransmitter type compounds like serotonin and anandamide and phenethylamine in there that make you feel that chocolate bliss feeling.
Mhm.
And I saw this as something really unique because you kind of have this Grand Canyon. And on one end are foods that people traditionally think are good for you, but don't taste good. You're not going to eat them for pleasure. On the other end, you have foods that taste great. People love them, but nobody thinks they're health foods. Nobody's going to do it because it's good for you. And there's not much that connects across this great divide. And I kind of imagine this little bridge going across the Grand Canyon, and the bridge is built out of chocolate because this kind of lives in both worlds. It's something that, of course, we all know people eat because they love the chocolate experience and it just tastes amazing, feels amazing in the mouth, and they have this almost like romantic connection with it.
Mhm.
And if done right, it could possibly be one of the healthiest foods in the world. So I saw this as my gateway. This is my, there, of course, I wanted to develop a myriad of different ways to get the greatest ingredients possible into people. But this, I thought, okay, this could be my first vehicle. This is how we can get people started. This could be the gateway health food. And in the following years, I was also getting into these traditional herbal systems of indigenous cultures. And you see a lot of these herbs have bitter flavors to them. You see, like reishi mushroom, for example, or ashwagandha, or different like cordyceps or schizandra. These all have bitter components to their flavors. And those bitter components are generally the ones that are the most beneficial in there. And we've kind of bred bitter flavors out of the Western food system. It's kind of another whole other topic, but we kind of bred the bitter flavors out of our plants and sold those compounds back to people in the form of drugs. Now, the problem was that because of that, people in the West are not very accustomed to consuming bitter flavors and enjoying them. Weirdly, the one bitter flavor that people seem to have accepted is chocolate bitter flavor.
Mhm.
I don't know why, but they go for it. And I realized I can take some of these other bitter herbs, like I'll mention again, reishi mushroom is one of my favorite herbs in the entire world, and camouflage it beneath the chocolate bitter flavor, and it kind of sneaks in there. It's kind of a Trojan horse, and you can deliver some amazing herbs this way. And cacao is a vasodilator, so it helps with the absorption of the herbs. It's also a mild MAO inhibitor, so it helps the herbs stay in the system and keep working for longer. So I realized, wow, this is going to be fun. I get to be Willy Wonka in the chocolate factory. What a dream.
That's awesome. All right, I love this whole story. Now, I gotta go back to one thing real quick because I am genuinely curious about this. That
Yeah.
smoothie that you were drinking in the Costa Rica, a hostel, you said, I think,
Yeah.
while you're about to go surfing, did that taste bad to you or just to your friends?
I had been drinking it so regularly that I came to be like, I knew it tastes pretty unusual. I could tell you that, but it didn't taste bad to me. I was so used to it. I think when you have certain flavors on a regular basis, you become
Mhm.
desensitized to them to a degree.
Yes.
For example, somebody who drinks coffee for the first time, they're like, oh, wow, that's bitter. Somebody who drinks black coffee all the time, they won't tell you it's bitter because they those flavors have become more neutral to them. Or the first time somebody drinks like red wine, it's weird. Um, and they're picking up dominant flavors in there that an experienced wine taster wouldn't be distracted by. So it tasted gnarly, but I was okay with it because I knew the feelings I was going to get. I didn't care what it tasted like. I wanted to feel good.
I only ask because I've over these last 10 years have created so many concoctions and all this stuff. And I thought it was I think many for many of our health practitioners too, it is where you make something that's like perfect for you and then it becomes totally normal. And then someone's like, all right, finally they give in. They're like, give me a sip of this. Let me try this, whatever. They're like, wow, what the hell did you create with this? And all we've done is validate our hippiness to them. So
How
I'm
crazy we
glad that
are, right?
yes, I'm glad that you got this awesome lesson, it seems, in marketing and sales, where it's like, no, you don't give people what you want, you give them what they want, and then put the stuff that you want in there, right? So everyone wins, and it's you can still give them the healthy stuff, but you can show them how to do it in a tasteful way. So, with your company now, can we talk about the name of the company and what some of the core products are with it?
Of course, yeah. The company is Addictive Wellness. And the idea there's a couple levels to the meaning of the name, but the idea is that you can get hooked on stuff that's actually really good for you. And you can get hooked on working on your health and taking your health to higher levels. And the deeper meaning of it is that addictive comes from the Latin root addictione. And this was originally used to mean devoted, as in devoted to one's loved one or one's God. And it wasn't until heroin came around and they saw that people had this devotional relationship to the drug that it took on this totally different meaning. So we're also hearkening back to the old school meaning and saying you can be devoted to your wellness and have that be a primary focal point in your life to optimize. So we started with chocolates, and that's still the focal point of what we do. But in our chocolates, we have, instead of different flavors, we have different functions. So we have created a different herbal formulation in each of the chocolates. So you have one for energy, one for beauty, one for relaxation, one for focus. And we've got 8 of them in our line now. And a part of my specialty is also the sourcing of these herbs. I was fortunate to grow up in and around the health industry and made some amazing connections through that and through my family and through my travels around the world to be able to procure some incredible sources of these ingredients. And so when people would discover these herbs through our products, they would say, oh, I love the reishi mushroom that's in your tranquility chocolate, or I love the lion's mane that's in your focus chocolate. I want to take more of that on its own or get more into it. Where do you recommend that I get it from? And I was always in a bit of a bind there, because I would have to either, send them somewhere else, but more importantly, I would have to send them to a company that I hadn't tried their products maybe in many years, because we had just been importing these ourselves. I've got, the big supply, the massive jars at home of these, and I haven't used them from this other brand. Maybe this brand was great 5 years ago and I enjoyed them, but I feel weird endorsing something I haven't used in that long or recommending it. So we thought, maybe we should just start offering these herbs as individual extracts so people can start diving in a little deeper. So we do that, and we have cacao powder, and then we have our elixir blends, which are drink mixes incorporating these adaptogens, but made with really delicious flavors into creamy drinks. So we want to make them all as fun and accessible as possible.
Can we talk about why desourcing matters so much and why quality matters so much? Because, just like many of these plant products out there, they do absorb heavy metals and toxins from the environment. And so it's interesting because you could have two things and one is loaded with crap and others are actually very pure. So can we just talk more about like specifically why that's important and what's ending up in some of the chocolate that's grown in not so optimal conditions, let's say?
Yeah, so cacao is a big focal point of this, and of course you see it with growing of mushrooms and adaptogenic herbs and tonic herbs. But in the cacao world, you have a couple different levels of things, right? You have or I would say you have really a spectrum. On one end of the spectrum, you would have some very heavily hybridized cacao grown in Africa, perhaps in really depleted soils, grown by slave labor. You have a lot of pollution in the area. It's on a monocrop plantation. Heavy metal contamination is a big issue, both in the growing and in the processing. And then this gets diluted with tons of other lower quality ingredients, and it's just not going to be a magical experience, both when eating it and the ultimate long-term effects on your health. Other end of the spectrum, you can have a cacao that is not even grown on a plantation. It's wild harvested. And these are old wild cacao trees that have been growing there for between 20 and 80 years in mineral rich volcanic soils, quite some distance away from civilization. And this is going to create a whole different kind of experience. And these are kept raw throughout the process. So they're not heated beyond 118 degrees. So you maintain the integrity of some heat sensitive compounds in there that you would lose if you were roasting the chocolate, for example. And then it's also kept mycotoxin free, which is a huge issue with chocolate products. Almost every chocolate product out there has problems with mycotoxin contamination. And these are metabolic byproducts of mold that is in the cacao. And ours is a very, very rare one that's actually mycotoxin free, and confirmed by ongoing third-party lab testing, of course. And so, yeah, there's a whole spectrum of quality out there, and you really have to do a bit of searching and diving and exploration to really find the best quality.
I appreciate you bringing up something that I wasn't even expecting, but it really does matter because people, it's not that I want everyone to be pessimistic, but like we really need to be realistic about what happens in this. Chocolates on them that I'm not actually sure about the quality offhand. I would assume it's a little better than average, but perhaps not
Mhm.
as good as something like what you offer. But you'll see like the fair trade exchange sticker. You'll see this on bananas a lot too. And then, I think most people that are in the health food store buy this and don't think twice, like, oh yeah, that's cute. That's nice. They don't even know what that means. And it's like, okay, if there's a label for fair trade on it, that means a lot of the other stuff that doesn't have these things, one, maybe they can't afford to do it, so fair enough. But two, if it's a manufacturer that's really large and doesn't have that, that means it's coming usually from really questionably places with questionable ethics. And I think it's
Sure.
like hard for some people to believe, especially in the Western world, that it's like, wait, there is slave labor that's happening right now that manufactures the chocolate that I'm eating. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on that just to not live in the negative, but it is real.
Mhm.
I mean, can you just explain that a little bit more? Because you mentioned it briefly. It's like that's something that happens right now, right? There are kids out there and people out there that are being used to do this kind of stuff for either no wage or incredibly unfair wages, correct?
Correct. Ethical sourcing is a huge component of it as well. Fair trade is mainly an issue in Africa, not so much an issue in Central American and South American sourcing of cacao. Um, but in total transparency, we also don't have fair trade certification. It was something that was pursued. We pursued it with our South American partners for some time, but because of the wild sourcing of our cacao, they looked at the whole operation and said this is way too complex for us to deal with getting involved with too many different people going to this land, and they have access to this land with a few wild trees there, and these guys go to this land. So that's part of the reason we don't have it. But like I said, it's a primarily an African issue. And the other thing is that because of the higher quality cacao that you're getting, the the more expensive it's going to be, right? In terms of market prices of that kind of cacao. And that also means that at every step along the way, there's more money for each people along the food chain of that chocolate. So people that are procuring our chocolate are generally getting somewhere around 4 to 6 times normal fair trade prices.
Yeah, and thank you for specifying that. I was really telling people to watch out for, I won't mention any big names, but like maybe giant chocolate manufacturers that might have been mentioned already on this show that you would think it's like, oh, they're a huge company. They can't do that. It's like, yes, they can. And they do it all the time. So it's not that having the sticker is necessary. I mean, if you go to a small place relative to these conglomerates, right? These chocolate dominators in the space, then that's I wouldn't really worry too much about Sage, is my point. But it's like the organic thing, right? Not everyone meets the organic label because there's a cost, but yet some of the best food in the world comes from local farmers that are never going to get that certification, right? In the United States of America, at least. So,
Right.
yes,
So if
thank
the
you for
certification is
specifying
not
that.
there, you just have to do a little bit more follow-up work sometimes as a
I'm not
consumer
worried at all
and
about you.
ask the
Yes.
question. No. But I just we have customers that come to us and ask as well. So I think it's important to share the full story.
Thank you. So, all right, I'm curious as someone who is a self-proclaimed chocoholic to the core. It started out with the milk chocolate when I was young, and then I learned better, and so I said, all right, I might as well move away from that. And I don't know if I'm much better off now because I love dark chocolate. It's actually interesting because I can eat the most rich milk chocolate if I wanted to. That's not really something that happens. Maybe like a holiday that would happen nowadays, but I typically avoid that. But then I'm also someone who I would eat the raw cacao nibs right out of the bag, like the 100% pure stuff, and it just didn't bother me. I'm not saying that it's
Great.
quite as good taste wise as the milk chocolate, but I'm like, so is there an upper limit on this stuff? Because of course there is caffeine in here. There's theobromine. These things can be somewhat addicting. So it's not that it's inherently bad by any means, but there's probably an upper limit that I think I'm often exceeding. So do you have any opinion on how much is too much here?
Yeah, and of course, it's not going to be an exact same answer for everybody.
Mhm. Yep.
for a couple of reasons. It's going to vary across the population. A lot of it is going to have to do with genetics, because there's different genes that affect how we metabolize things like caffeine and theobromine. Now, fortunately, there's not too much caffeine in chocolate. For example, me, because I have the COMT++ gene, I can't touch caffeine. Like I can't do coffee, I can't do green tea, I can't do yerba mate. There's a small enough amount in chocolate that, thank goodness, I can have that, because at least, I got to have some fun in life. So what you see in, for example, a tablespoon of our cacao powder is 12.5 milligrams, which is basically on like the range of like a strong cup of decaf coffee. So it's very, very low compared to, a typical cup of coffee. You're looking at like 150 milligrams. So it's in a totally different world there. But you do have this main stimulant compound in cacao, which is theobromine, which is a cousin of caffeine. It has some commonalities, but it doesn't affect the central nervous system in the same way that caffeine does. And it takes you up slower and doesn't get you as high. Like nobody has ever gotten a coffee level buzz off of a bar of chocolate, because it works in a different way. But there's certainly going to be an upper limit for everybody. And it's also going to depend on the percentage of cacao in what you're having, the format that you're having it in, whether you're having it nibs, powder, eating a chocolate bar. And so you just have to pay attention to your well-being as an individual. If you find that it's interfering with your sleep, okay, you went a little bit too far. If you find you're becoming a little over hyper and not able to focus optimally, okay, maybe you went a little too far. If you find this is not so much an issue with chocolate, but maybe more with coffee, that you struggle to start your day or get going without it, okay, now we're talking about a little bit of a dependency on a stimulant here, and you may need to give some love to your HPA axis. So it's going to be different for everybody, but the more you pay attention to your body, you'll be able to figure out, I think, what the sweet spot is for you.
Yeah, I Active Ev, right, admitting his flaws with stuff. I'm not perfect either. I've overcome a bunch of health conditions, but I still, I have my things. I would fall more into that third category than not. I do eat a lot. I can't even tell you the last time I felt anything positive from it at this point, because it's more like getting to baseline every day.
Right.
And then if we do, I've had some friends that we've done like cacao ceremonies with, and it's crazy because they'll drink like one cup of whatever was being made and they're like, whoa, they're all lovey-dovey. And I'm like, all right, give me another, but it takes a little bit more, which actually leads me to my next question. This is kind of just a random interesting one, but I know in the holistic health space and functional medicine space, at some point or another, they kind of do end up in a circle where they find themselves doing a cacao ceremony or something. So I know that there are so many components to chocolate that like lead to good feelings. We've mentioned some of them today already, but I've always been kind of curious what gets someone to that level. Cause I mean, it truly feels like lovey-dovey. That is almost the word to describe it. You could take the most hard-hearted son of a you-know-what, and you give them a nice cacao ceremony, and they really just lighten up. It's kind of crazy. So what compounds are in there that actually lead to that? Is that the theobromine as well, or is that some other stuff?
It's certainly a part of it. The theobromine can bring some feelings of euphoria. I don't want to fail to mention the set and setting there, because you're coming to a place to have a beautiful experience. You're
Sure.
in community. For a lot of people, this is a rare time when they sit still and actually pay attention to what's going on in their bodies.
Mm-hmm.
So doing those activities leading up to it is certainly very synergistic and supportive. But then in the cacao, you have the highest natural food source of magnesium. So that's helping to bring relaxation to all the muscles throughout your body, and also help with ATP production. So help your own cellular energy production mechanisms. But then you also have some of these compounds in here, like serotonin. It's your body's natural stress defense shield. If your serotonin levels are high, the world could be melting down around you, and you're like, okay, well, look, it's going to melt down, and then we'll build it back up. It's cool. If your serotonin levels are low, everything could be perfect. It could be paradise, and you're like, I don't like it. It's boring. and so there's that, and then you also have theobromine, which you mentioned. You have phenethylamine, which is known as the love bliss chemical. It's what gets secreted in your brain when you're having love and passion. It's, I think, a large part of why we had that Valentine's Day chocolate connection. And then you have anandamide, which is another very powerful bliss neurotransmitter type compound that makes you feel that bliss. So there's a lot working in synergy here, I would say.
Nice. I didn't know about that last one. That's interesting. I will look that up afterwards. So thank you. But yeah, it's like it's crazy that you use those words, even like love and stuff like that, because that is how it feels. It's like all of a sudden, if I was, frustrated with something, I'm like, I'm a little more open to the possibility that perhaps I was wrong in this situation. Now it's
Wow,
like, yeah, I don't know. I've loved the cacao ceremony stuff. We were
beautiful.
doing some. My friend was bringing these. It sounds hilarious because you're talking about like importing stuff. He was bringing these bricks of from Guatemala, and it was
Mhm.
like awesome stuff. So that was really cool. Okay. Anyway. In terms of your company and what you offer, I'm just curious. Do you do any kind of stuff one on one? Because you seem like you'd be an amazing coach, or is it just that people can buy?
I historically have done some one-on-one type coaching and consulting stuff. In the past couple of years, I haven't, just because my slate with running the business has been so full. We do
Sure.
we do put out regular YouTube educational content, and a lot of that comes from people sending us in questions, and then I'll make a video and reply, and that way, more people can benefit from it than just the one person. But at this stage, not doing any one-on-one stuff.
No worries with that. Where can people? And I'm shouting it out a little prematurely, but I'm just like, I got to know myself. I want to make sure we have it for afterwards in case people don't make it to the end. Where can they find your products if they would like to start using your stuff?
So we have a number of retailers throughout the country, but it's always easy just to order from our website as well, from addictivewellness.com. Or many of our products can be found on Amazon too. And we ship anywhere in the world.
That's great. What retailers are you in? Any like big ones?
No, none of the big name like
Okay.
big chains, but for example, Air One was our first retailer and continues to be
Okay.
one of our best ones. Lots of retailers, mostly on the West Coast, but we also have a variety of different medical practices and doctors' offices and wellness centers across the country that carry our products and health food stores. I mean, like I could name like, okay, here's one in Missouri, here's one in like
Sure.
Chamberlain's Health Foods in Orlando, but it's hard to without knowing where people are at to say. But people can always message us as well, and we'll see if we can find somewhere near you, or we just mail it to you.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and I just didn't realize it was that big. That congratulations, that's great. So,
Thank
but
you.
that's hard to compete. I don't care how high quality the stuff is. The food industry is one of the hardest things to go into and start getting any shelf space with. I love business, and I that's impressive. So, very cool.
Thank you.
In terms of people kind of transforming their health here, I definitely want to focus on this too. So, you're obviously someone who's been into this for a long time. You already know from a young age, or knew from a young age, that what you put into your body very much matters in terms of the outcomes for health. So I'm curious, has anyone kind of come to you guys and like converted, maybe you were like part of their conversion from like the standard American diet to some of this stuff, and they started incorporating these healthier foods and they really saw a turnaround? Because you mentioned your friends back in the college days, and of course it was almost too much for some of them back then. The toxicity was so high that when they put this good stuff in, and this is real, by the way, guys, this actually can happen. You're detoxing all this crap. So I'm just curious if there's any like, I normally ask for client testimonials. I guess that's a bit tougher to do with a product based thing. So I'm just wondering if there are any stories of people who started using your stuff, really saw a benefit, and shared that story with you.
Yeah, one of the biggest areas that we've seen people just really thrilled with is people who are dealing with mold illness, which these days more and more people are becoming aware of that they're dealing with it. 10 years ago they were dealing with it. They just didn't know what was going on. And they're very sensitive to most all chocolates because of the mold and mycotoxin issues. And they thought, I can't have chocolate anymore. Fortunately, they at least tried Googling mycotoxin-free chocolate, and they found us. And
Nice.
it was just a huge relief for them not to have to permanently say goodbye to chocolate. But also, kind of the way our whole product line is designed is that we want you to discover the herbs through the chocolate, and so we kind of Trojan horse in that way. And then maybe our energy chocolate is where you meet cordyceps. And then you say, like, wow, this is actually feeling pretty awesome. I want to become better friends with cordyceps after meeting him at this cacao ceremony that I did in the form of a bar. And so let's hang out with cordyceps more. And then, you start taking cordyceps as a regular daily thing after that. So I love hearing about that when maybe somebody gets given a gift, because chocolate, it makes such a fun gift, especially around holidays and stuff. And people get a gift, experience not only this kind of cacao for the first time, but a lot of these herbs in there, and you kind of sneak it into them, and it kind of gets them thinking like, wow, I felt great at that family party after, Aunt Sue gave me that chocolate bar,
Mhm.
maybe like I got to look back and see what was in there, and I want to feel that again. So that's what I love the most is when I hear about somebody who had minimal health interest, but this kind of it gets them open to it a little bit and things start to shift.
Nice. Yeah, they realize, okay, being healthy doesn't have to suck. It can actually feel good. It can taste good. That's great. And thank you so much for bringing up the mycotoxin thing again, because I wanted to ask about that before and then I forgot. So, because I was in an apartment with my fiance, we thankfully got out in October, but we were in an apartment that did have mold. And it sucks because I've been in this functional medicine space forever at this point, at least a fraction of my life, it feels like. And I know about mold. I'm aware of the downfalls of it and what can happen if you're exposed to it, and yet it crept up on me so slowly that I just did not connect what was happening. And sure enough, we ended up finding, I was a little careful with some of the things I was eating as I was in a recovery process. I still think I am to some degree, but it's a night and day difference, thank God, from October. So when you of the chocolate brands have some type of mycotoxins in them, is this even the ones that say like, they look good, right? They're organic, they're in the health food store, everything's conventional stuff, but like, is it affecting those types of brands and chocolates as well?
100%. Yeah,
Okay.
it's so incredibly rare to find one that's not. And I don't want to like toot my own horn too aggressively or put myself up onto too crazy of a pedestal or whatever. But the cacao can be certified organic, can be coming from the coolest, most friendly brand, and it can still have huge issues with mycotoxins. So that it's really pretty wild. And more and more people are realizing that this can be hugely detrimental to your health, especially, about 50% of people have a gene that makes it much harder for them to detoxify mycotoxins. And if you take that kind of a person, combine them with living in a moldy environment for a while, and that makes things even worse. And then they think, oh, I can't have chocolate anymore. But it makes me so happy to take somebody who's in that point of like sadness and desperation and say, here, I have what you need.
Yeah. Well, you've sold me with it because I don't want to. I mean, I would love to continue my chocolate habit, but I've been more hesitant ever since that October because I'm like, I kind of know what I'm doing, and I didn't know if my particular brand has a risk with this. So you obviously discovered that most of these brands have issues. Is there a way that the average consumer can figure out? Because it might just help them to verify. It's not that I don't believe you that most do. I
Mhm.
think that's accurate, but of course, there's going to be people that listen that say, okay, I want to go look into this myself. Is there a way that they can verify that their brand does or doesn't have mycotoxins in them?
Most brands don't even test for it because they've
Okay.
kind of accepted that it's going to be there to some degree. If you want, you can, of course, ask a brand, like, do you test for mycotoxins? If so, what are your results, or can I see your results? And that's an opening point to a conversation. You may find somebody else out there that has something great as well. Maybe we're just the loudest ones talking about it and not the only ones, but I think a lot of them are going to have disappointing answers, unfortunately. I wish it wasn't, such a big issue, but it is just a part of the world that we live in these days. And you can, you just got to write him and ask. And if you wanted to invest big money into it, and probably the average person doesn't want to do this, but you could get the chocolate and actually send it off to a lab for mycotoxin testing. But
Hmm.
probably more trouble than the average, even chocoholic, wants to go through.
Yeah, I'm like, all right, how do I write to the boss at FDN to see if I can get them to invest in that for a podcast episode? That'd be something, right? That could be good content. You just gotta hope it takes off. So,
Right.
is it fair to if a place is a big company and they don't even offer the testing for, or they don't test it themselves, that it's probably fair to say, okay, that's because it has it in it.
At the very least, it's suspicious. To me,
Okay.
it's like if you were mycotoxin free, why wouldn't you want to prove it?
Yes. Yeah. Fair
Why
enough.
wouldn't you want to? It's a powerful marketing point, which is why, like, obviously, I talk about it maybe even more than I should. But if you could be, why wouldn't you say it?
No, I think you're preaching to the choir here. I actually really appreciate you bringing up this point because this is something that in our graduate group, for example, as FDNs, I mean, every single day, multiple times a day in that group, there's someone talking about a mold client or they're the ones dealing with it. And, it's to the point where I was not shocked that it happened to me. It's like, because I heard it so much, I'm like, I almost thought it was getting overplayed, which is very ignorant of me. And then, of course, it happens to you, and you kind of get humbled by that. So I'm already looking for different things. I know that we have 1,000+ practitioners looking for things in just the graduate group alone. So it leads me to my last question. Do you have, clearly, you have stuff set up for the direct consumer, which we have plenty of those that listen to the show. Do you have anything set up for practitioners that might want to have some type of wholesale relationship with you to give to their clients, and like welcome boxes or anything like that? Is that something? I don't even know if your company would have had that type of demand for something so specific yet. Is that something?
Absolutely. We work with a lot of practitioners
Oh, nice,
who
nice.
brings our things into their clinics and practices in just that kind of way. And even if somebody is a practitioner and they like just work remotely with clients, there's not a desk where they can have chocolates for them. One, you can get the chocolates and just eat them yourself. Two, we could always work on some sort of a partnership where we're shipping the chocolate to your patients and clients, and then we're making sure you get a piece of the action too.
Sold. And let's say, I mean, hypothetically, someone that was on the podcast live was interested in doing something like that. Is that also addictivewellness.com, or is there a more specific place to go?
Yeah, so
Reach out.
they can send me an email directly. You can email me at sage@addictivewellness.com, and I'll make sure to take very good care of you.
Awesome. Sage, thank you so much. All right. So I want to finish up today with our signature question on the show. And, you know, whenever we're focusing on one specific thing for most of the show, I think people always think this last question is going to go in a particular direction. But again, I could tell from your bio and just from talking to you, you've studied a lot of this stuff. Yes, you have your avenue now with your current company, but I'm sure you could have spoken very intelligently on a wide variety of topics in the health space. So
Thank you.
that's why I'm interested in asking you this. If we could give you a magic wand and you could wave it, and now you could force every single person in this world to do one thing for their health. So that means you could force us to start doing one thing, or you could force us to stop doing one thing. What is the one
Mhm.
thing Sage gets us to do?
Well, I'm tempted to throw out a broad category thing like improve your sleep health and do 20 different things under that umbrella. But I should probably give one more specific uh, item. And I would say start taking one adaptogenic herb. And you may see different ones on our website or see different ones on our YouTube channel. You may see things like reishi mushroom or lion's mane or cordyceps. Reishi for stress and immunity and spiritual growth. Lion's mane for mental health. Cordyceps for physical endurance and testosterone and immune system. And find one that sounds exciting to you, and get it, and take a half teaspoon of it, put it in a couple ounces of hot water, sit somewhere quiet, slowly sip on it, and get to know it one-on-one like that. A lot of people try to start taking a mix of 30 different herbs and superfoods and a green powder all at once, and it can certainly be beneficial, but you never really get to know what in there is doing what. You never get to know them on a one-to-one basis. And I think it's like if you want to start dating somebody new, you don't take them on the first date to a rave with thousands of other people. You take them somewhere intimate, somewhere quiet, somewhere you can start to get to know them. Later, you can go wild, to go party, like go to these crazy concerts together with millions of people. But initially, get to know them one-on-one. Pay attention to how they make you feel, as opposed to other influences or other things in whatever you're drinking or eating. And then from there, you can start to build out a little bit and maybe try a few other things. But pick one and start to experience what I want to say what the hype is all about, but what really this ancient wisdom that's been around through thousands of years of experimentation and trials and learning and wisdom is really all about, and why people have kept doing this for so long.
322 episodes in, question asked every time at the end, and somehow you still had a unique answer. So I'm surprised on one end and not surprised on the other end. You're very,
Thank you.
your passion is obvious. It's so cool to get to interact with someone like you on the show today. And I'm glad our service seemed to finally kick in there and it worked out. So thank you so much for coming on the show, Sage.
Thank you so much.